I want to welcome you back to an all-new episode of Laid Back History. And for today's episode, we are sitting in Madeline's garden, which is the site of our upcoming event, Spirits in the Garden. And so today we're talking about Spirits in the Garden, and then we're going to have a special guest joining us in the garden today. So if you don't know what Spirits in the Garden is, Spirits in the Garden is one of our annual events. That's a big garden party where we invite local distilleries and wineries and breweries to come in and set up here in the beautiful garden to sell their wares and their spirits, to give out samples. Part of the ticket price coming in is you get free samples. As well as that, we have incredible food from local businesses. And then the name of the event, the Spirits in the Garden, there's two types of spirits. There's the kind you can drink, and then also our ghostly spirits. So in that we have historical figures from Washington County's past that'll join us to tell their history, what their connections are to the county. Like last year we had President Abraham Lincoln. May not think there was a connection there, but there actually was. We've had Ulysses S. Grant in the past, and there's definitely a connection there. He used to visit here quite often. So we always have people that are connected to the county join us in spirit form. And so want to talk about Spirits in the Garden a little bit today. And for the next few weeks, we're going to have each Tuesday, there's going to be a video for the next 3 weeks where we'll have a different guest with us telling their story. So for this year, though, we have 3 guests, actually 4. There's one that's always here, and that's Madeline Lemoyne, the First Lady of Washington. You know, the garden's named after her, and so she is our host. But then we have 3 other guests, and this year we're focusing on agriculture. It's kind of been the theme of the year around here because of the running of the wolves, the inaugural running of the wolves event that the Historical Society worked with the Business District Authority on. And then this year is also the 225th anniversary of the Washington County Fair, which is going on right now. And so we wanted to look at that agricultural past of Washington County and kind of focus on that. So our guests all have a connection to agriculture. We have Francis Lemoyne, who has actually been our guest in the past. We had him, I think, the first year that we did this event, but we thought, you know what, he's got such a strong connection to agriculture, to sheep, the sheep industry in Washington County, we had to bring him back for this year. So he'll be back. So Madeline's father, Francis Lemoyne, is going to be here. Then we're going to have Andrew Ralston, and if 2 weeks ago you watched the episode of Laid Back History, you'll know a little bit about him, told a little bit of his story. There, he was an inventor from out in Cross Creek. He worked for R.B. McClure in his machine shop in West Middletown. So there's a connection there through one of his inventions, the thresher cleaner, first combination thresher cleaner. It was called the Ralston thresher. And then our last guest is one that is probably long overdue, but that is Major A.G. Happer. We always have a theme for Spirits in the Garden, and last year was kind of tied to the Civil War, but you know we could have had him there. We could have had him for a number of different things, but because he's done a lot, but he has a tie to agriculture. He was a member of the Fair Board and the Fair Committee to help keep the Washington County Fair going during his day, so he has a strong connection there, and we thought he'd be very fitting, but also just has a very fascinating story, and we might talk a little bit more about him leading up to Spirits in the Garden. But also, there's another big announcement about Major A.G. Happer, but I'm going to wait on that one. We'll get to that here in a few weeks. So, at any rate, yeah, so the event, it's a wonderful garden party. If you want to sample local spirits, you want to just have an incredible atmosphere. I mean, this garden is so beautiful. The Martha Washington Garden Club, they do such an amazing job keeping this garden in condition and keeping it going. So, yeah, cannot thank them enough for all that they do. Yeah, they're absolutely wonderful. So you can meet some of them. Some of them will be here normally at the event. We get some of them. So definitely you'll want to maybe come and just to thank them for all the work that they do for this beautiful garden. But got to thank Washington County Tourism Promotion Agency. Thank you for the shirt, but also they are our presenting sponsor for this event. This will actually be the fourth or fifth year that they've been the presenting sponsor of this event. So can't thank them enough. Howard Hanna, they're another sponsor. Stone Mile is another one that's going to be sponsoring us. So really can't thank them enough. And I'll announce more of the sponsors next week when we do this again. But for today, we're going to have a special guest with us, Rebecca Harding Davis. She's going to tell you a little bit of her story. She was a guest a few years ago when we had to do the virtual Spirits in the Garden because of the COVID, because of the pandemic. So, but we're going to have her telling her story. She is one of America's most famous female authors and one of the first really women authors to break through. She's absolutely incredible. She was born right here in Washington and was very close friends with Madeline Lemoyne, actually. So, but I'm going to go ahead and let her tell her story, and I'll see you when she's done.
My introduction to Washington in 1831 was something of an accident. I was born here, you see, but only on a visit. My mother was visiting her sister at the Bradford house while pregnant with me, and that's when I decided to arrive on this earth. After that, I lived west of here, homeschooled in Wheeling until age 14, then returned to Washington to attend seminary. I was valedictorian of that school a few years later, in 1848. The school was enough math to do accounts, enough astronomy to point out constellations, a little music and drawing, French, history, and literature at discretion. All in all, it was well-rounded and enjoyable. That well-roundedness quickly earned me a position as a staff writer for what is today the Wheeling Intelligencer. I became the first female editor of that paper 10 years later. Despite all of my career success, I was quite socially isolated. Throughout this period, I never seriously courted anyone. This lifestyle, however, allowed me to draft a work somewhat more in-depth than my articles for the Intelligencer. It was ultimately published as Life in the Iron Mills, and many critics cite this work of mine as a pioneer in the realism of American literature. Louisa May Alcott generously said that I was a brave new voice in American literature, and while I appreciated the compliment, my goal was not to be a voice in literature, but for those who were without little voice themselves. African Americans, Italians, women, the impoverished, minorities nationwide. This cause inspired me to travel and to circulate among many other fine minds of the day: Hawthorne, Fields, Emerson, and the man who would ultimately become my husband, Clark Davis. Clark was what today you would call a huge fan, and through our conversations we fell in love. We were soon engaged and then married. Many of you may also know my son, Richard. You see, he played a somewhat significant role in the Spanish-American War some years later, documenting Teddy Roosevelt's exploits as one of his correspondents. I, by that time, had focused on motherhood rather than my writing, but I was not done making an impact. Some of you today may remember the resurrection of my story and my works in the latter half of the 20th century, what you refer to today as the women's movement of the 1970s. Please know that both lives that I led were quite fulfilling. I even got to befriend our hostess, Madeline, as a result. I met her sisters years before at seminary, and we traveled the coast together, she and I, and even tried our hands at a career as artists. I see one of the little paintings she produced in our excursions hangs in the house today. How funny to see it all of these years later.
So what a really great story of Rebecca Harding Davis. You know, absolutely incredible person, and yeah, can't thank her enough for being here with me today. So, but again, don't want to go on too long. You know, we've been really doing my best to keep these videos down to 15 minutes. So we'll go ahead and cut this one a little short now. But the big thing is, Spirits in the Garden's coming September 9th from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. here in Madeline's Garden. Come meet Madeline Lemoyne. Come meet Andrew Ralston, one of Washington County's greatest inventors. Francis Lemoyne, one of the most well-known figures in Washington County history, an abolitionist, basically equal rights activist, helped on the Underground Railroad, was involved in agriculture. He's involved in everything. And then, of course, Major A.G. Happer, which he was involved in everything too. Incredible guy. So we'll talk about him maybe next week a little bit more. So, but come on out. Tickets are only $40. What does that $40 get you? It gets you free samples. It gets you entertainment by Dan Baker. He'll be right there on our little stage area, right there somewhere. I can't really point, but there's a stage. He'll be right there playing in between the different presenters. It gets you incredible food from Butler's Pantry and Farmers and Friend Market, from Chico Bocello, from the Spring House. Great, amazing hors d'oeuvres coming from Butler's Pantry, though. I mean, so worth. I mean, right there, the ticket price is worth it just for that food. But also, the entertainment, the guests, the atmosphere. Going to be absolutely incredible. And again, brought to you by the Washington County Tourism Promotion Agency. I don't know what to say other than I'll see you next week. We'll talk a little bit more about Spirits in the Garden and have another guest in the garden with us at that time. So hope you guys have a wonderful day, a wonderful evening, a wonderful week, and I'll see you next Tuesday for an all-new episode of Laid Back History.